wonderful to be back and wonderful to see everyone again. I'm coming to you from Liberation House again. So at some point, when all the boxes, or at least most of the boxes, are unpacked, we'll have an open house here. But the team in Portland, the Board of Stewards, made it very welcoming and livable for me. And then on Monday, the truckload of things arrived that were stored. So it's going to be a slow process, just to say. And I had to laugh. So I've been living out of suitcases for about 8 or 9 months. And I found all the books I carried around with me, except for the Pema Chodron book we've been working with, the one book that doesn't seem to be in any of the boxes. However, we will finish that book because it's auspicious to go from beginning to end of a text, but not today. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about retreat and a little bit about the poem, The Seven Delights, that was so meaningful and important. So I was in retreat at a Dharma center in West Virginia, and they had very small cabins on the edge of, I would call it a big hill, they call it a mountain, overlooking a huge valley. And in particular, I was doing a Tara retreat so that in the future we can introduce the skillful means of Vajrayana in our meditation practices for those who are interested. But it was particularly wonderful, excuse me, to be focusing on Tara at that particular time. I went into retreat the week before the election. And first of all, a good example of the significance of retreat or the importance of retreat was one I learned with the owner of the retreat center, who very kindly sponsored the retreat. And he was driving me out there and saying how much they like sponsoring monastics on retreat because from their perspective, when you are studying meditation, it's like reading a menu. You know, there are all kinds of meditation instructions from all kinds of traditions. And then when you are sitting and thinking about and contemplating the teachings that you've received, it's like seeing the dinner served at the table next to you. But then when you go into retreat, that's like eating the meal. And I thought that was such a great and very true example. So we've been receiving all of these teachings, you know, for years and years and years. And actualizing the teachings is something that happens in retreat, whether it's a short retreat or a longer retreat. But retreat is very important. And in the new year, we will have 2 Sharavasti retreats, and I'll schedule some one-day retreats. So just to say, the immersion, both in practice and in silence, the silence of non-distraction, and seeing your mind for what it is at that moment and practicing to the best of your ability with the time you have. You know, understanding what obscurations are there, understanding how slow the removal is of obscurations, and then the gift of practice is a wonderful combination, and it was a wonderful combination, particularly at that moment and particular particularly Tara. So in Vajrayana, we understand that the great realization that the Buddha had is inexpressible because it's non-conceptual, and we only understand things with our conceptual minds. But to give us a reference, there's a sense of the realization being like light passing through a prism, P-R-I-S-M, and seeing all the colors of the rainbow reflected. So the light is still the light, but it's manifesting, expressing with many different colors. And Tara would be one of the colors. And Tara in particular is fearless compassion, which is so important all the time, but at that unstable moment, very, very meaningful. So to sit on the edge with a vast valley unfolding before me, and in the Vajrayana, you arise not as your normal, ordinary mind, normal, ordinary body, but as the aspect of realization that you're understanding in the practice that you're doing. So holding a compassionate mind, a fearless mind, and a mind that rests in equanimity, so no sides, no favoritism, no views, during the period before and after the election was, I feel, contributing to stability. And essentially a roadmap for how to go forward, understanding that samsara is always going to be samsara, but the gift of the Vajrayana is to have an opportunity to hold the view of the fruition that one day will occur in meditation, to sit in the absolute kindness and look through the eyes of Tara at everything that's manifesting both internally and externally. She, on obtaining enlightenment, it's quite a story. There is an historic aspect of someone who is very, very devoted, and then there's the aspect of the story that's told more from the absolute perspective. But from the absolute perspective, there was Chenrezig, who had the vow to liberate all sentient beings. And every time he thought his vow was complete after working for limitless eons, so, beyond millennia, he would turn around and then samsara was full again. And he started to lose hope that he'd be able to complete his vow. And brokenhearted, he thought, how might this be possible? And the aspect of Amitabha arose and said, please don't be discouraged. And his tears turned into white Tara and green Tara. White Tara being the fearless activity of healing, and green Tara the fearless activity of compassion, the swift movement of compassion. So in a sense, we might think of internal and external Tara. And in that moment, she expressed her vow, "Fear not, I will protect all beings. I will ferry all beings across the terrifying ocean of samsaric existence." So she joined Chenrezig in his vow, saying, "You're not alone. I will help you." And let's not think of beginning or end. Let's think of, in this moment, in this day, what can we do to liberate our own obscuration so that we are able to see through the eyes of Tara? And what can we do in terms of our activity with a soft and kind heart? So I look forward to offering preparation for Vajrayana and then introducing the Tara practice. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But I wanted to go back to that point just before I left, where we were contemplating the 7 delights, and we have 2 verses left, but I left with the verse, "When my body has succumbed to the attacks of painful illness, I do not count on medical relief, but take that very illness as a path, and by its power, remove the obstructions blocking me, and use it to encourage the qualities worthwhile. When illness rears its head, sheer delight." So from this perspective, we have our ordinary mind, and the verses talked about all the different kinds of obscurations, the emotional obscurations, the ignorance that occludes our realizing the vastness of our true nature in all the many ways it manifests. And part of the ways it manifests is karma. And from our perspective of karma, when we have an illness, it's a karmic seed that's ripening. In fact, all of our circumstances, everything we experience, is our karma ripening, or the results of previous deeds, good and not so good. But if we understand illness as one of the great purifications, as opposed to that sinking feeling of this is old age and death, everyone that is alive is subject to these very painful realities, it gives a different kind of perspective, because having received the Dharma, we have a way of working with illness as path, as a way to remove some of our obscurations. And I think one of the difficult things is we don't realize how very much is a slow process, unless we have extraordinary karma to have an instant realization. For most people, it's a slow process. And it's more like water wearing away a stone. But we're in a culture that wants instant results. And we're in a culture that has these shoulds. I'm a Dharma practitioner. I've been studying all these years. I should be able to find this easier than it is, let's say. But if we look at the 2 lines, remove the obscurations blocking me, and use it to encourage the qualities worthwhile, when illness rears its head, sheer delight, that's a totally different perspective. That it's arising as purification. So there's part of the karma that is ripening and then gone. So that's wonderful. And it's in the circumstances where I have all these resources. And little by little, like water on a stone, if I'm able to look at how obscured, fearful, resistant my mind is, and use this illness as a way of just wearing away a little that aspect of mind, then it's a wonderful teaching. And we can say, all right, we have not just an intellectual understanding of impermanence, but we have a little bit of a realization of impermanence, using impermanence of the body. And we have a little bit of a realization of the extraordinary opportunity we have in this precious life to learn something. So there's moving from the menu, from looking at the meal at the table next to us, to actually have a lived experience that we then own. Even if it's the water wearing away the tiniest bit of the stone, we still own that clearer vision that we didn't have before. And this is linked to the next verse very intimately. When it's time to leave this illusory tangle, don't cause yourself anxiety and grief. The thing you should train in and be clear for yourself is there's no such thing as dying to be done. There's just clear light, the mother and child, clear light uniting. When mind forsakes the body, sheer delight. So they're linked in the sense of, if we, in our lives, are able to wear away the fear, the resistance to the body changing, to the reality of the actual quality of suffering, of illness of the body, without suffering in our heart-mind, the greater compassion that it evokes for all sentient beings, and the understanding of impermanence, then as we begin to approach death, we have lost some of that fearfulness and resistance that often masks the experience. So at the moment of death, there is a flash of the relative and the absolute uniting. Our ordinary mind and, let's say, our Tara mind becoming actually visible and present. But we can only see that if we have eliminated the fears and the resistance to the bodily changes, and if we have actualized our meditation to the degree that we can rest and abide in the wisdom mind that's accessible to us through meditation, which would be the child, then the child realized can unite with the mother. And then that would be sheer delight. So in some ways, these verses are very, very clear. And in some ways, they're packed, absolutely packed with meaning and instruction from the great meditator Gotsangpa, who composed them. So this is a good poem to maybe take the verse that's the most meaningful for you and print it out and have it in your home environment, so you can have that particular Dharma teaching, something that echoes every day, and we don't lose sight of the point of life. The point of life being the great compassionate heart mind that we're each capable of fully manifesting because it's inherent, and understanding that it's our delight to remove the obscurations. I don't want to say duty, I don't want to say challenge. And of course, we're always easily overcome and overwhelmed, but we can return again and again to gratitude that we can see the obscurations for what they are. We're not so lost that we can't see, and we have extraordinary instructions passed down to us. And then if we really understand, if we really take in and understand that we are this capacity, we're both the absolute and the ordinary mind mired in fear and obstructions and ignorance, that both are true. And with an understanding that we have the capacity and that the obscurations are inseparable from our guru. Let's just put it that way. I remember there was a nun at Gampo Abbey who was getting close to death, and she was so frustrated. You know, she had done everything right. She'd been through a 3-year retreat. She became a nun and was, you know, living her practice. But she knew she wasn't enlightened, and she was frightened of death. So she asked Venerable Pema, you know, what should I do? And the instructions were so wise. It was, look at what is the easiest trigger for you. And every time that easy trigger arises, bow to that trigger and say, you are my guru arising in the form of whatever that trigger is, reminding you that it's a slow process. We have extraordinarily deep habits, and every chance to make a tiniest progress on the habits, even thinking about meditation and thinking about looking at our triggers is considered extraordinarily powerful and beneficial, because they're creating a different habit of mind that is beneficial to you and helpful to you. So we'll go into this a little more next week. It may be that the book will appear. It may be that it won't. If anybody has a PDF version and can forward that to me, we have, I think, one more chapter in this book. But this poem of the Seven Delights is quite a teaching and quite helpful. So let's just sit for a moment, and if you were to look within and say, what is your most accessible trigger? And how you might change your view of that trigger to see, oh, this is my teacher in the form of this factor, this irritation, this fear arising. What might that look like for you? So let's take some time to sit with that. Okay, and return. I'll do a dedication for the live offering. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase.